Love is a high-risk behavior.
Welcome to the podcast, High Risk for Heartbreak. I am your host, Christina, and I'm so glad you decided to join me today. If you are new here, I pray you find value in at least one thing I say today. And to my old and faithful returning crew, you know just how much I appreciate you. If you are new here, I pray that you hit that subscribe button to help me get to 1,000 subscribers by December 31st. Lofty goal, but we're on our way. Also, if you like this particular episode, let me know by hitting the thumbs up button. It keeps me informed about how to better tailor this channel for you. Today, I want to speak about some patterns of behavior that I believe have sabotaged my relationship with myself at certain points in my life and, of course, with others. Now, this is sort of a sensitive topic, so bear with me as I make my way through this. However, I will say I've had a really good day and I'm feeling very happy, so I might be laughing. Who knows? It was something that I felt burdened to speak about after a conversation with a friend recently, so without further ado, let's relate. Last episode, I detailed my engagement ending. And it's easy to break up with someone and have this one-sided story about them doing X, Y, and Z to you. And for some, that may be true. However, I found that there's always two sides to the story, which both have their truth and validity. And in my case, I can now look back and I can identify my own behaviors that have aided in my heartbreak. While I was not the one who ultimately breached the relationship, there is a self-responsibility that comes with being in a relationship with others of any kind. And that responsibility drives who you show up as for yourself, which in turn affects the quality and the nature of your relationships. And these are things like personal values, like self-esteem, clear direction about where you're headed in your life, your giftings, your attachment styles and proclivities or leanings towards certain habits, your traumas and how they have shaped the way that you show up in the world and the way that you think about people relationally, and so much more. Relational responsibility starts with us first. It starts with our hearts. It starts with our spirit. And when your spirit is unwell, you aren't healthy spiritually. And some might see this interchangeably with your soul, which I believe to be your mind, your will, imagination, emotion, and affections, as I've said before. And that lack of health in those areas will ultimately impact the health of other areas of your life. And I see so much social media rhetoric on relationships today, and there's just so many interesting and unwell patterns of thinking, leaving us in this sort of loop of questioning why our relationships with others do not work. My pastor would describe this phenomenon as self-sabotage. It's this idea that the enemy works inward and it comes outward. If he can influence you to destroy your life first, your soul or your spirit, then you will destroy all that is for you as well. It's like a cause and effect. It's like dominoes. It's like life. Who we are impacts our relationships, and it's time that we begin to address the personal responsibility that we hold with creating healthy relationships. It's also time to address our own self-sabotaging behaviors that relegate us to unhealthy and forever ending relationships. And I don't know about you, but I don't want my friendships to end, right? The ones that I forged, that I have been working on for years and years and years, I don't want them to end. Now, I do understand endings happen, but if we can mitigate that, if we can work through it, communicate through it, if there's certain things about ourselves, patterns of behaviors that are sabotaging to our relationships, we need to be aware of them and we need to take responsibility for them. And one of the areas that I have struggled with personally for a lot of my life is recognizing those patterns in others and in myself, okay? Now, today we're going to go all the way to the red flags because honestly, those are the ones that ultimately destroy us relationally. And so I want to take you on this journey through a few glaring red flags that I did and did not see in my last relationship. Also, I was waving a few of those red flags myself, and I will be also talking about that. I believe, though, that every person has red flags somewhere, and your red flag to you could be a yellow flag to somebody else, okay? It's all perspective, right? Anyway, let's go through these 5 glaring red flags and how I dealt with them. I'm going to go through these 5 red flags that I did and did not see in my last relationship, turned engagement, turned back into singleness. Number 1, he ghosted me. He ghosted me, you guys, very early in the beginning of, we weren't even in a relationship yet, and he ghosted me. The way I gaslit myself on this one, until literally I was writing the script, I was like, man, that was really kind of messed up actually. All these years, I really saw this as endearment. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to explain. But I'm realizing that it was really just endangerment. This was the first thing that should have sent these bah, 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 alarms off, ringing in my head to not pass go, because there's just so many more effective ways to handle the same business that he needed to handle. So when we first started speaking, we had been talking for about 2 weeks. And I remember there was a moment between he and I where we had a couple of impasses, and he said to me, he felt like, what was the, I don't exactly remember the term. It was such a long time ago. It's like 8 years ago now almost. But he said to me that I don't want to say combative, but it was something along the lines of that. He did not use that word, but it was something along the lines of that. Like he would have to work in order to have a conversation with me. And I can see it. I can be a little much. So we were butting heads a little bit, right? He disappeared for a couple of weeks, but he was super active on social media. And I was like, wait a second, I thought we were vibing, even with the discussion that we had, right? It was to me a small thing, right? Something that could be worked through, but he just disappeared. Now I told myself that I was not going to help a man. So I was in this stage of like, I'm not reaching out. If he wanted to, he would. If he wanted me, he'll come. I was in that stage. Okay. And I've had to work that off of me because that's weird. Okay. It's a weird thought process. Yes. If he wanted to, he would, but also if you wanted to, you would too, right? If I wanted to talk to him, why didn't I reach out? I just didn't. Okay. So that was where I was functioning 8 years ago. And so, he ends up coming back after the 2 weeks. And he came back to tell me that he cut off all the other ladies that he was speaking to, and he wanted to solely focus on me. Now, do you see my dilemma? Do you see why that wasn't a red flag for me? Do you see why I gaslit myself? Do you see why I retracted everything that I was feeling and crying on my bed in 2 weeks? Now, why was I crying after 2 weeks? Because I really liked him, honestly. I really liked the guy, but it just was so interesting. So anyway, it wasn't the tying up of the loose ends part for me, actually. It wasn't. I was like, I'm mature. People see other people. I'm not expecting him to like me off the bat and be seeing me only. It was just the lack of communication around his intentions that really bothered me. And I can't be the only one out here who likes to remain informed, okay? Just tell me, hey, listen, I'm seeing a couple girls. I got to like explore a little bit just to see. I'll be back, or I may not be back, or whatever, right? When I am suddenly out of the know, though, of something that I was so much in the know of, I had a little bit of panic come on me, okay? Panic jumped on my back a little bit. And that's exactly what happened. But what really was the issue here is that I told myself a different story after he came back with his reasoning. And I didn't stick to what I was feeling in those moments when I had to work through the time when he was ghosting me, right? Little did I know, though, that this would create a pattern throughout the beginning of our relationship where he was okay not communicating with me. And I had to become okay with it too. I played myself. Number 2, this isn't a promise for anything. He said to me, this isn't a promise for anything. These words. Why didn't I believe him? I moved from LA to ATL, shawty, to bring us closer together and explore what the industry had to offer. I wouldn't have left LA so quickly had it not been for our relationship progressing. I would have stayed. But I moved in with him, and one of the first things he said to me is, I don't know if it was actually before. I can't remember if it was before I left, like right before I left, or when I like immediately got there. But nonetheless, this is one of the first things he said to me. I think I had already started my moving process. He said, this isn't a promise for anything. Now, by this point, he'd met my dad and my mom. I had met his family, all his immediate family. His prompting, though, should have been a fair warning to me that his heart wasn't ready for a huge commitment yet, and that he wasn't sure about me. And this was more than 2 weeks, by the way. I think we were like 10 months in by this time, 9 or 10 months in. And that's a very short amount of time, of course. But I didn't move to the city that I was moving to only be with him. It actually made sense. It would have been different if it wasn't a city that had entertainment and work for me, right? But it did. So I was like, this makes sense to come. I, however, would have preferred that those words would happen well before I started my moving process, like shutting down everything, because I had multiple jobs. I was transferring jobs. I had started that process, I got promoted to a new position in one of the jobs that I held, packing, selling my goods, my belongings, because I don't bring my stuff across country, just my clothing and my car. Right. I buy everything new. That's what I prefer to do. Right. So I wouldn't have done all of that stuff if it if he had told me that earlier, right? Like, this isn't a promise for anything, but this is us just trying to see. So, he wasn't wrong in saying that, but I wasn't right in not believing. What am I saying? I would have preferred that those words happened well before I started my moving process, but I really, really hoped and believed that I could prove him wrong. And this is what I really want to hone in on, you guys, especially for you ladies out there. I was believing that I was the woman for him that would someday help him see my value through auditioning and showing him I'm worthy. Please, 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 ladies out there, you can't prove him wrong, nor should you endeavor to. It is my belief that generally a man controls access to romantic relationships and sometimes the level at which it progresses, right? And not that we are waiting in the wings to be chosen, because that has not personally been my experience. But one of the things that I said with this man was, Lord, I am not going to help him. I'm not going to help him along. And that meant that I was not going to force my value on him. I wasn't going to audition and show myself all of my best tricks to please the king's court. I wasn't going to be a jester. I wasn't going to be fawning at his feet and jumping on one foot and barking. I was going to go at the pace of his readiness. And we did for 4 years before we got engaged. And I only learned, of course, after that we were engaged, that he actually had the ring after year 2. There were some struggles obviously there with him, and I was just waiting for those struggles to turn into triumphs. I was just waiting. I was just showing him that I could wait, that I could be there as long as he needed, right? And while this waiting can end beautifully, okay, there are relationships and circumstances where this ends beautifully, especially if you're really young, right? You got to work on some things, right? This can end beautifully. However, you have to be agreed on where you are moving to and at the same pace. And him saying this is not a promise for anything is not agreement, even though that was in the very beginning. But more importantly, we need to be moving towards the same thing. We actually were not agreed, and I allowed that to be okay for me. And in the end, I reminded him that he kept his non-promise to me. I remember on that day saying, remember when you said this thing to me? I guess you did keep your promise. That was my little petty moment, but it wasn't really a promise for anything, right? Please don't spend years trying to convince someone to love you the way that you deserve to be loved. If you don't agree, accept that and move forward with faith that God will provide someone who you can agree with and who will commit to you fully. Number 3, my boundaries meant nothing. Now, I mentioned last episode that my ex-fiance and I were physically active and we lived together. And I understand many of you won't bat an eye at that, because, maybe you have a different level of belief or set of beliefs, but I do believe in order, and I believe that God set this order to be a protection over our souls, right? And over our bodies. Sexual immorality is a degradation of the soul and the body, and I failed to keep myself from that. Now, he did not force me to live with him. I chose to live with him after looking for apartments and couldn't find anything, and it was like, you could stay here, and I was like, great, and that's what happened, right? Neither of us necessarily really wanted that in the beginning, but it became that. But I will say, in that, God did not let me enjoy what was going on, okay? Please, I just need to be able to be candid here, because Christianity is such a personal journey, and we don't all come to know Christ at the same time, nor do we have the same convictions, right? There are varying areas where God is growing and challenging us and sanctifying us. And this area is not one of them that most are willing to accept as a non-negotiable. So what do? We negotiate and we say, well, it's okay because I am in a relationship that I can do these things, right? I can live with them. I can do this and that and da 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 da. Because I'm in a relationship, I'm not just out there on the street. To be honest, though, when I really look back at this and I look at my life and the times that I have done that, I'm like, it's the same, sis. Because you're not under covenant, you're not covered by God, right? So there are these protections and orders so that we protect ourselves, and we are to abstain from sexual immorality, which is spoken about many, many times, right? Fornication, all of that stuff. When we don't, we reap the discord and the dysfunction and then the destruction that comes in that relationship because of it. And then here we are coping with the reality that we have given ourselves away to someone who didn't stay. We're giving ourselves away to someone who's long gone. We've given ourselves away to someone who didn't care or who treated us poorly. And it happens over and over again because we're in a relationship. I did not guard my body or my soul from that heartbreak. I didn't guard myself. I could have remained abstinent, and the heartbreak wouldn't have hurt the same. I can tell you that as a woman of God, the heartbreak wouldn't have been the same. And furthermore, we probably wouldn't have made it that far. If I had abstained, that relationship would have most likely ended sooner, thus protecting both of our hearts from the deeper devastation that it underwent. Ultimately, that is a submission issue, of course, for me. For me, I was not trusting God enough that if I did not give myself to him, that man would be able to like or to love me enough to stay, to wait it out. And it has been such a journey uprooting this kind of mindset and reprogramming myself to not betray me for the likes of a man. So this played out, of course, as me being on the fence and actually choosing my fiance over what God told me to do. And it was such a source of disgust that I had with myself to be performing for his approval and acceptance and crying afterwards. I'm just being real. Repenting again and again and again, but doing it again and again and again. And I know a lot of you are watching and you may not have had this reckoning with the Lord, right? Where he's come to you and he's told you, listen, I want you to stop that because it's not fruitful for you. You're hurting yourself. And you may feel it's okay to give yourself away as often as you like. And that's really your cross to bear. But for me, God wouldn't even let me enjoy the disobedience. I couldn't even enjoy it, you guys. That sounds so crazy. It's a crazy thing to say, but I think you understand what I'm saying. My conviction was immediate and I still kept doing it. I praise God for not turning me over to a reprobate mind because he could have. Imagine living like that for 5 years. It just does something to your soul and your spirit. Self-betrayal is a red flag, just as much as betrayal of others is. I was red flagging myself. That is a sign of an unhealthy heart, a heart void of faith. That has been the enemy's greatest access point with me since childhood. And I know what it stems from, but I don't know why he's come after me in this way. It's something that I've had to actively fight against for a lot of my life, is not betraying my boundaries. I had no boundaries with this though, and I expressed them, but then I didn't keep them. I taught him to disrespect my boundaries. And well, Number 4, I was doing too much, okay? I was doing too much, you guys, and I know you know what I'm saying, ladies. You got to see me on this one. From the beginning of our relationship, I was Miss Whatever You Need. Whatever, sir. And remember I said I was not going to be performing. I was not going to help a man along. That meant I wasn't going to coerce him or push him or force him to love me or any of that stuff. But there was a level of performance that was happening. Okay. I'm a performance artist. There was a level of performance. The list is far too long to say, but let me just say this. I was doing so much, right? And that the man didn't even need to commit to me to marriage because he was receiving all the benefits that marriage would offer. From supporting him in multiple business endeavors, cooking, cleaning the house, working over 40 plus hours, coming home and still doing all that. He did, however, I will say, he was Mr. Laundry Man. That man handled the laundry for us many a times. I was, though, extending myself to a degree emotionally, physically, spiritually, domestically, mentally, that was spreading me so thin because I was trying to juggle all of this stuff, but I didn't have favor and covering over me. I didn't have covenant. I didn't have grace that God would normally give to usher you through a situation like that, right? I did it all to make sure that he and I were good. And that's my heart. That's my heart. That's why I did it. It wasn't that I was putting on a show. You can't put on a show for that long. It was my heart to do that, but I was out of order. I thank God that he wasn't a lazy man. In fact, he was a tremendous executor. And that's something that I always really admired about him is his ability to just get things done. But this really wasn't about his efforts matching mine or going 50-50 on chores or any of that stuff. It was about me performing many wifely tasks for a man that couldn't even promise me a secure future with him. It was about me lacking boundaries again and again that would set my soul up for success relationally if it was in the right context. But because it wasn't, it set my soul up for heartbreak. Throughout our relationship, I was absolutely doing too much. And I should have advocated more for myself as a woman before I decided to come along and do this. And before he came along, honestly, I should have been advocating for myself and building myself up more in that way. But I didn't know I needed that. I didn't know I'd fold like that for that man. I folded for him. And the woman that God was growing me to be was not that girl. Okay. That growth was interrupted. It was not that girl. I had no real advocacy. And when I did try to like make amends, right, to the way that we were running the relationship, I was just met with resistance because ultimately it was about me working for him. And that's how it worked. Me doing too much was working for him. Do you guys hear me? When the relationship ended, I looked back at where we both ended up and I realized how unfair it was to myself to take on that responsibility and how out of order it was. I left nothing to the future marriage that we were going to have. Now, some believe try the cow out, whatever. I mean, I'm not just talking about that. I don't think you have to do that. I think God gives you the grace for these things. But it was a serious reckoning that I had to have during my healing process. And I don't want you to look back and feel like you have invested all that you have and it didn't produce the fruit that you believed it would come, that you would believe would come from it because of all of the seeds that you planted, all of the tilling that you did, all the watering, all the waiting for the sun, all of the looking, all the speaking, all of the things that come with nurturing something. I don't want you to end up in a situation where you've been nurturing a seed in barren ground, waiting for it to root, to sprout, to grow, to fruit, to harvest. I don't want that for you. Number 5. Now this is last, but it's certainly not least. And trust me, honestly, there's probably like 50 more things that I could list. But number 5 is definitely the sum total of all of the things that I just spoke about. And that was ultimately that I did not love myself or God enough. My no was as good as yes. It is this thought that what he had to offer was better than what God had to offer me. And while I'm very sure that those weren't the exact thoughts that I had running through my head because I'm not that calculated, right? I was having all of this, of course, transpiring within my relationship as if I had forgotten God's nature and his promise for my life to bless and keep me, to shine his face of favor upon me, to be gracious to me, to bring me to peace no matter the circumstances. There's not one relationship that I have experienced that can follow through on this promise that God follows through on, that he has already in my past. Why couldn't I recollect that in the midst of this trance that I was in for 5 years? How quickly I forgot, how cloudy my judgment became in all of the doing. Somewhere along the way, I stopped believing in God and I wanted him to put his blessing on what I wanted. I was praying for God to bless my disorderness. Disorderness? My disorder. I was praying for God to bless the lack of order. God blessing me is an act of his gracious discretion. He is the blessing. He dispenses himself onto our going-ons, right? And I wanted God to dispense himself into the thing that was ripping my heart out and taking me farther away from him. Somewhere, at some point, I believe that my man was supposed to come before God. And that was very evident in my actions and self-sacrifice. And I forgot that obedience to God is better than sacrifice. I also forgot that I should be loving myself to the measure and degree God called me to, and that he would never call me to self-betray or to grossly compromise my integrity and my values. I was not loving myself first after loving God and then loving my neighbor. I was heavy on the love for the neighbor, and that led me to a very unnecessary heartbreak many years in the future. Idolatry is such a meaty subject to speak on, so I may need to dive into this deeply in another episode, kind of just further detailing the consequences of not trusting God first. And of course, that doesn't only happen within our relationships. It can happen in career. It can happen in anything. In closing, all heartbreak is not avoidable, but there are some red flags that you might be missing or ignoring in your relationships that need to be addressed before you hurt yourself. Remember that loving others requires a level of health and a level of responsibility to handle them with care. And it is really hard to handle others with care when you don't even handle yourself with with care. Ignoring or missing the red flags is seldom worth it, you guys, and it can lead you down a path like mine where you have no choice but to experience life-altering heartbreak because you gaslit yourself. You didn't believe the truth that he told you. You violated your own boundaries and then let him do it. And then you had the nerve to want him to respect them. You were a wife when you weren't a wife. It's very much clear to me now, as in hindsight is usually perfect vision, that I am remembering my walk with God is a process. It's not all at once. And because of that, there are still things that I suffer from that cause me to suffer and then put suffering on other people. However, God does not want that for us, to suffer aimlessly. He never promised we wouldn't experience suffering and heartbreak, but he did promise to bind up our wounds created as a result of our heartbreaks. Now, let me know in the comments if you guys, first of all, enjoyed this. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. And if you have experienced or ignored any red flags in your relationship. Community is all about strengthening each other daily and doing right by one another in earnest. And I pray that my sharing has helped you see some things that will strengthen your ability to walk earnestly and honestly with strength and in faith. I love you guys so much. Thank you so much for loving yourself first so you can then go and love your neighbor. Until next time.
Why don't you stay a little longer? You like what you like, right? Subscribe to the channel so we can spend a little more time together, and maybe comment your thoughts because I care what you're thinking. Love is the risk and the reward.